Good morning, everybody. I am Julie Roginski here with Olga Lautman and my crying new puppy. Look at this thing.
I cannot.
What
Oh
just
my
came
God.
like an hour ago.
That's it. We could do the show on this and that's it.
I mean, you guys, there's a lot of stuff in the world that's not right, but look at this little puppy that I just got and look at how cute she is.
No,
A little mini dachshund. My son begged and begged and begged and begged, and my husband and I finally agreed. We already have a dog, but if you hear any crying in the background, that is, we don't have a name for her yet. So if anybody has any suggestions, let us know.
Oh, and she sounds like a baby. Like
She's
she sounds like a baby.
She's just 2 months old. She came from Indiana. They just dropped her off in a car from Indiana, like literally an hour ago. So
How big does she get?
I think she only gets to be like 8 or 9 pounds.
Oh, okay.
And my Hagrid, who everybody who watches the show knows, Hagrid of not the show, but watches Mayday Network, Hagrid of Tony Danza fame, is not doing very well with it because he's very confused as to why anybody would pay any attention to anybody other than him. So he is sitting here staring at me, will not let me touch him. He's so upset. He's not happy at all, my sweet boy. So my husband just texted me, please go overboard for Hagrid, the poor guy. So it's just, yes, a lot of stuff. So a lot of good stuff happening. Yes, if Tony Danza even tries anything with this little dog, we're going to have serious problems. Okay, so Olga, back to the real world of where things.
No, I don't want to go back.
I know. I
want to stay with little baby Munchkin, and it sounds like a baby. At first, I thought you had like an infant that you were babysitting or something.
That would be a Christmas miracle. I know. No. She is a little teeny tiny,
my God,
miniature dachshund, and she came. My son was begging us to get another dog, and we were like, "Come on, we already have a dog. We live in New York in an apartment. Like, come on!" And he just finally wore us down. So since he's starting high school,
good job.
Yeah, he wrote a. Well, I was actually all for it. My husband was not. So he wrote him a very nice letter that was like, "I will be starting high school next year, and I will be under tremendous stress, and I need something."
I love it. I love
it. As you know, I will be starting high school where I have to worry about college admission, and therefore I need something to take my mind off of this. So we are debating. My son wants to name her Bean. My husband wants to name her Maggie. So we have a Haggy and a Maggie. She looks like a little Penny to me, so I was thinking Penny. Actually, I wanted to name her Monster before she got here because I think that's a cute name, but she does not really look like a monster.
No,
I know. Okay, so back to the real world of things that are not that great. There was Trump goes to China. You and I have not talked in a few weeks, but Trump goes to China last week. Why, Olga? Unclear. Xi Jinping was like, all right, buddy, come on over. We're not going to give you anything. We're not going to agree to anything. But, if you want to come and bring your kids who are doing business in China with us, that's okay. And Trump came back saying he got all this stuff accomplished. Nothing actually got accomplished.
Nothing.
Like
nothing.
And as a result, now this dog is biting my computer on my laptop. As a result, there's just, okay, you can't bite my laptop. Sorry. Oh my gosh, she's literally biting my laptop. I'm not going to call her Liberty Dana. What am I, Meghan McCain? I don't think so. So she ended up, sorry. So, okay, this dog is literally going a little nuts here on my laptop. So,
he came back with absolutely nothing.
And then, of course, who shows up in China just days later to stick it to all of us? But Vladimir Putin.
Yep.
And they got a lot accomplished, Olga. I mean, it's unbelievable. unbelievable. Xi's basically taking jabs at the U.S. He's talking about how the international situation is marked by turbulence and transformation. And basically, as you point out, talking about just massive overreach. It used to be that we would go to places like China and lecture them on democracy. Now we go to China and they lecture us on democracy.
Imagine.
Thoughts, comments? The end of the Pax Americana as we've known it for 80 years, yes?
Yeah. The only thing that brings me any kind of comfort is that thanks to Putin's genocidal full-scale invasion, he has turned Russia like literally into like, not even a partner. I would say reliant fully on China. I mean, I remember when Xi came to Russia years ago after the full-scale invasion, and literally he was there because it was like a 75% off sale inside of China, inside of Russia.
Right.
And Putin, like really before, Russia actually had the strength with China to somewhat compete with China, or at least a facade of the strength to somewhat compete with China. But Putin has driven Russia to such a desperate point that literally he comes there like a beggar, also. I mean, Trump is there like a beggar with, I want to be part of your dictator club. Please let me in. Putin comes like a beggar, like, please give me money. I need your banks. I need this. I need more money because right now Russia's economy is, I mean, really, really challenged to say the least. So that's the only thing that brings me comfort. But yes, they stood there taking jabs at the US. And last time that Putin was there, we actually did a Pax Americana episode.
Yep.
And that was when Putin had ordered the jamming of von der Leyen's plane, the EU commissioner, as she was landing in Bulgaria, and they had to use paper maps because the GPS went off, and it was like a whole, thing. So, that was the message last time that they sent to Europe. And here, you have them, standing shoulder to shoulder and basically taking jabs at the U.S. and showing that we, have like we're just unstable, and basically that the United States has no more moral authority or any kind of say of anything in the world because we are basically, doing the same, if not worse.
Yeah, it's interesting because we can talk more about von der Leyen's plane, which, by the way, was an assassination attempt on a leader of the European Union, and it kind of, went by the wayside. We all kind of moved on. But the other thing that I think is really fascinating, and you wrote about this in your Substack, which I'm going to drop in the chat for people to read because I think it's really important. The Chinese have been not just sticking it to the U.S., they've been actively helping the Russians, and they've been helping the Russians in their war against Ukraine. Which is just, again, I mean, this is a genocidal war that's going on. And nevertheless, the Chinese back in, you said, I think July of 25, came up with a secret deal to train, covertly train Russians to fight in Ukraine. And this, sure enough, the Russian troops were on Chinese soil as recently as late, I think December or late last year. And then they were drone operators, which the Chinese obviously know a little bit about, electronic warfare, which the Chinese know a lot about, and combat personnel, which everybody knows a little bit about. And they deployed illegally to Crimea and to Zaporizhia Oblast. So lest we think this is just a fight between Russia and Ukraine, it's dragging in a major world power that's got a lot more money and a lot more of know-how, technological, military than Russia certainly does. I mean, they are actively fighting on behalf of the Russians, the Chinese, and we are, and yet, interestingly, the Western world, except for the United States, is moving closer to China. You've got Canada coming up with deals in China. You've got Europe looking east to China. Friends, think twice. I mean, I get it. I understand why. It's a massive market, but you also have a country that is not embodying any kind of Western ideals that we're all, kind of fighting for.
No, and China, I mean, since the full-scale invasion, I mean, it took them only a few months, around June. The full-scale invasion was launched February of 22, and by June, China began helping Russia. I mean, I worked a lot on this, tracing military components, weapons components, the Ukrainian call it military and intelligence would find on the ground after a drone or a missile exploded, and then they would piece together where these parts came from. And you had parts from the United States, Texas Instrument, a lot of. You had a lot of parts from China, from Czechia, I mean, literally from everywhere. And it just showed how massive this sanctions evasion scheme was, because you had, I mean, companies in the US using third-party countries to move chips and other dual-purpose components. And then it would make its way to China. And then from China, it would be marked under, fabricated invoices of like very creative invoices, and then make its way to Russian companies, and then to Russia's defense ministry to be, put together these missiles and drones and other weapon systems. Same thing, by the way, with Iran. I mean, Iran, I remember looking at one invoice, it was freaking bananas. And there were missiles in the invoice, I mean, on the ship that was on its way. And it was literally marked as, fruits and vegetables. But this shows you the bigger thing. Just you hit the nail on the head, because you have China helping Russia since the full-scale invasion with military components. And another one of our Pax Americana episodes, which anyone who watches us probably gets more info than actually gets info, because our media will never cover this. But on another episode, we talked about how Russia was training Chinese troops inside of Russia. Now, the newest reports are that China was helping train Russian troops. You had North Korean troops fighting, I mean, tens of thousands fighting inside Ukraine for Russia. You have, we'll get to it later, but a ship that was sunk under mysterious circumstances that was carrying nuclear material. CNN just reported it last week. Ukrainians reported this a few months ago. I remember sounding the alarm. It was the end of the year, I believe. To show that, here you have the shadow fleet, that it's not just carrying oil, that there are weapons and nuclear material, on these shadow fleets that are traveling around, that Europeans and Americans and everyone have been, letting move things around the world for the past few years. And then you have, of course, Iran. We saw all the reports where China was helping Iran with intelligence and information, and potentially sending sophisticated weapon systems, right now. Bless you. And you have Russia, bless you, who is responsible most likely for the murder of the 13 U.S. military members, because they were giving Iran very, very detailed information on U.S. positions and whatnot. Plus, they were sending drones to China through the Caspian, to Iran, I'm sorry, to the Caspian Sea. And here you have a picture that emerges that while Trump is kissing the ass of Xi and Putin, these powers, or not powers, these authoritarian thugs, North Korea, Iran, Russia, China, have been working together against Europe, against the United States. And this is only the beginning, because the worst case scenario that people are very worried about is that as soon as next year, Now, in 27, I mean, we're months away from 27. As soon as next year, China can launch invasion of Taiwan and ask Russia to launch an attack against a NATO country in order to split the European alliance. And obviously, U.S. is, done. We're not involved at all. And that's it. So, I mean, this is just the beginning, and it shows you the shapings of, a World War III, where you have these axis of evil taking shape, and you see who's siding with who. And the U.S. is just, Trump. Trust me, if he could, he would be 200%, siding with North Korea, Russia, China, and align the U.S. fully with them. He's trying. He's having a little resistance, at home. But if he could, and it was up to him solely, we would be fighting on the side of China and Russia, and potentially he'd actually be providing intelligence to Iran to kill American troops, because that's basically what he's supporting.
And it's fascinating because as Russia is going to work with China to train troops, to create drone fare, the Chinese are actively on the side of the Russians in this war. There's no two ways about it. The North Koreans, I don't think, would be doing what they're doing if China did not okay it in Ukraine. Despite all of that, Putin has the temerity to threaten Latvia, this little brave Baltic nation in the northern part of Europe that used to be part of the Soviet Union. So, of course, Putin believes that it should be again. Threatens Latvia over claims that I think you say are unfounded, that they're using their territory to launch, Ukraine is using Latvian territory to launch drones into Russia. The chutzpah, I don't know what other word to use, threatening little Latvia when they're working with China is just astonishing to me. It's the Latvians who hate, they just hate the Russians for obvious reasons. For people who don't know the history, Latvia had this very tiny moment of independence before World War II when the Soviets marched in there and liberated the Baltics and annexed Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia to the Soviet Union. But, the Russians are using Belarus as their launching pad, not just against Ukraine, but for terrorist strikes in Poland and elsewhere. They are, if you look to the east and south, working with China. And somehow, yet, they still have the temerity to accuse the Latvians, who are, by the way, PS, parentheses, members of NATO, of coming to the aid of Ukraine. The Latvians are, from my understanding, Olga, they're not using their territory to help Ukraine, but they could be, and they should be, if they had the ability to. The nerve of this guy accusing anybody else in a neighboring country.
You want to hear who has just as much nerve? Trump. Trump is asking Ukraine to ease sanctions on Belarus's potash. So basically, hey, Ukraine, never mind that Russia used Belarus to launch its full-scale invasion against Ukraine. Never mind that, Lukashenko is helping use his territory for continued attacks on Ukraine, on Poland, and frankly, across all of. Can you please ease the potash restrictions? They're both crazy. And this is something very interesting to keep an eye on. I don't want to give it too much oxygen, but I do think that our, audience really should know, just because this is something that should be kept an eye on, to see whether Russia is just, barking to distract from something, or if they're setting something up. Because, this went through the UN. Actually, I must say, very weird. I think Tammy Bruce is in the UN now.
Yes, she is.
And she actually went after Russia to shut this down, because Russia took this to the UN. to, launch a formal complaint that Ukraine is preparing an attack on Latvia and using their territory. The whole thing is bullshit. I mean, this really is bullshit. Russia obviously has no, say. Russia is humiliated though, because, and it could be part of this or it could be part of something that they're setting something up for the Baltics. But Russia is humiliated because, I mean, frankly, Ukraine launched one of the biggest strikes to date, against Moscow over the weekend. And and it was fascinating. I mean, I hate to be this evil, but I actually got a lot of enjoyment watching all the Muscovite women who are like, filming themselves. I'm shaking. I don't understand. Why are they doing this to me and whatnot? And I'm like, why are they doing this to you? Like, Moscow is one of the regions that actually has the highest support across the country for Russia's genocidal invasion. And here, Ukraine brought the war not even to them. I mean, it was against energy infrastructure and strategic targets, not blowing up every single apartment building and school and playground. And here saw the confusion, but they suffered a big humiliation, because I have to say I watched some of the videos and the drones were flying over Moscow. I mean, for minutes, like no one, like there's no air defense. And I just couldn't understand, like, where is the air defense for Moscow if you have one drone was like flying and went this way, and like, nah, and I'm not going to go this way. Then makes a U-turn, goes the other way. It was going and going and going. No one took out the drone. And I was like, this is incredible. Like, Moscow is supposed to be, one of the most heavily protected cities in Russia. And these drones have free airspace, whatnot. So it could be that.
Listen, I would not be surprised if Putin would allow an attack on Moscow to rally the troops, because it's typically what he's done. He did that. Obviously, he blew up buildings outside Moscow in 2000, excuse me, in order to get the Russians to agree to get the people behind him in Chechnya. And accuse the Chechens of doing it. This is not a typical thing for him to do, and frankly, it would not shock me if there were an attack on Moscow that either he would want to blame on the Ukrainians, or if he just allowed the Ukrainians to do it.
Yes, I agree with you. In this situation, though, from 1999, it was a little different, because when he organized with Patrushev the terrorist attacks, I mean, this came out of nowhere. Like, you literally had people in Moscow who are like, living their life and no clue what's happening, and suddenly you have buildings blowing up. In this situation, I mean, the economy is shit. And you have already the strain inside on the economy. Moscow, they're shutting down, I mean, everywhere, the whole country. They're shutting down the internet, and, and then like trying to shut down Telegram and whatnot. I mean, people make money off of, social media, and you have anger boiling over that. And then you have, I mean, for everything like this shouldn't come as a shock, despite Russians, questioning dramatically why is this happening to them. They know that there is a full-scale war that Russia has launched against Ukraine. I mean, this is not a surprise for anyone. So who knows what is happening? There's something very weird happening inside of Russia, and I'm trying to get, read on it. There's definitely something, and whatever this attack was part of it. Although Ukrainians did launch an attack a few years ago, and I mean, literally set the Russian flag on top of the Kremlin on fire. So
they're pretty precise. Look, I'm going to say this. I had a conversation with Gary Kasparov. I don't know if people on this chat watched it, but if you haven't, go back to my Substack and you can watch it. This is probably about 2 weeks ago, Olga, so you and I haven't spoken since. Maybe we have. But Kasparov made a good point about how Russians typically operate. They're all in on it. They're all in until they've had it, and then they're out. And you saw that in 1905 with the Russo-Japanese War. You saw that in 1917 with the storming of the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, and obviously then the Russian Revolution. You saw that ultimately when they gathered in Red Square in 1991, and ultimately the Soviet Union collapsed, and that Soviet flag came down off the Kremlin. So, I say all of this to say that typically it happens when two things have to happen. One is they have to have been promised to have won a war, and the war is not won. The Russo-Japanese War, World War I, Afghanistan, I can keep going, the Crimean War back in the 19th century. And coupled with that, there has to be massive economic pain where normal people are just completely starving to death. We're not there yet, I think, with the economy in Moscow. People are not, and it has to be Moscow and St. Petersburg. Like the people in the quote unquote provinces are always starving to death. But I don't think we're there yet in Moscow and St. Petersburg. He's done a very good job of trying to keep Moscow and St. Petersburg out of this war. I mean, he's not pulling from kids in Moscow and St. Petersburg to send to the front. He's pulling from the back of it beyond, because he knows that that's where it has to be kept sort of stable. I'll be curious to see what happens if this economy continues going the way it's going. To that end, Donald Trump is doing his level best to help Vladimir Putin, because once again, friends, he has extended another month of waiver on Russian oil sanctions for another month. Third straight month. Treasury waiver allowing countries to continue to purchasing Russian crude that's already loaded on tankers. It's interesting. This was crude that was supposed to be loaded on tankers before the first waiver was happening. Basically, it was crude at sea, Russian oil at sea. You'd think that oil would have gotten somewhere by now. I don't think they care if it's been loaded onto tankers. I think they're just letting it happen, irrespective of whether it's been loaded onto tankers. So what are your thoughts on that?
100%. Trump is doing everything. Look, his hands are somewhat tied because, as egregious as the Republicans are, you do have, still the old school ones who do support Ukraine and who are hawks on Russia. So they are tying his hands, whether it be, with him withdrawing, canceling the rotation of troops to Poland, and now they're scrambling to do a bill to basically prevent any troops from being pulled from Europe. We just saw a discharge petition that I believe was launched by Fitzpatrick, and it received a 218 signature to go for a vote, one on aid for Ukraine and two on sanctions, tighten sanctions on Russia. In Senate, they have the full support. It's just a matter, if Trump vetoes it, then I mean, frankly, there is full support. 2/3 of the House and Senate who support these measures. I don't know if they would publicly go against Trump if he vetoed it, but you still have them, tying their hands, doing what they can to try to prevent, Trump from exiting NATO, which I had warned years before for SEPA. I remember writing an article that Trump, is never going to be able to take the U.S. out of NATO, but he can throw wrenches in and basically make it ineffective. And that's it. And this is exactly what we're watching, him do. So they're trying, but if it was up to him, he would do everything and anything that he could to help Russia. I mean, he would provide them with loans like he did with Argentina. He would, Witkoff and Kushner again are going there for like the 8th time, I think. They should be going, I think, within this week, maybe even today or tomorrow. They're supposed to be in Moscow. So he's doing everything to assist them as much as he can. But his hands, luckily, are tied because we still have some kind. I mean, it's deteriorating on a weekly basis, but we have some kind of, safeguard guardrails, very few, in place to prevent him from doing something more. And someone had asked if the corruption in Russia is as bad as here. The corruption in Russia is 10 times worse. I mean, I don't think people can understand the magnitude of corruption. Everything is corrupt. I mean, literally, you could kill your wife and pay a cop, and they'll mark that she died of a heart attack, and that's it. And case closed. No one even looks that way. The thing that I actually was talking to my mom, because this is very interesting. The corruption here is Trump is throwing it in Americans' face. And Russia, the corruption is worse. I mean, the whole system is just a corrupt, like rotten system. But they are at least, they attempt in some ways, to kind of mask it with various companies, shell company on top of shell company, on top of shell company, and kind of try to like mask the paper trail and the money trail and whatnot. Here, no. I mean, like I will never imagine Putin, opening a fund, $2 billion slush fund to pay extremists and um, he called who attacked, I don't know, Red Square. Although Putin did publicly want to fund and said he was going to fund Wagner, which is a terrorist organization. But in this case, it's here it's just more in your face. Like Trump isn't bothering hiding. Like he doesn't bother hiding there. Um, Putin's children and family members are involved in every company, like main company and everything. But they are like, it takes actual, Russian independent investigators who, unravel and put together investigations to get to the true ownership after all the masking. Here, like you just literally see Eric Drone has, his own Eric Drone. Eric Trump is on a drone company suddenly, gets X amount of money from Pentagon. Like they don't even bother masking it, trying. So I think that's the difference here. That he's really, which I think is good because this, I wish it didn't happen, but at least they're not trying to hide it here, and that hopefully, as we're all paying more for everything to like breathe, um, hopefully that'll piss people off even more and force people in America to act, seeing this mass corruption.
Yeah, I mean, I keep thinking about the fact that Putin has $1 billion bunker somewhere in the Black Sea, I think. And sure enough, who wants his own $1 billion bunker? Now, I think Putin has that bunker not because he's afraid of attacks from the United States. I think he's got that bunker because he's afraid of being overthrown by his own people. And I also think that's why Trump wants his bunker, because I think he has no intention of leaving in 2029 and he needs a place to direct the coup from. I know that sounds crazy, but at the same time,
Not at all.
January 6th also sounded crazy until it didn't. So, it's fascinating how much he has learned from Vladimir Putin over the years that I think is just fascinating. I want to talk a little bit, Olga, also about NATO and this pullout in more detail. He's using the pretext of
You wrote an article about Poland, so tell us about your article, and then I'll include it. I actually pulled all the links for everything we're discussing, so I'll include it and send it out to everyone.
Yeah, so I did write an article about Poland, but what I want to basically talk about is that Poland, and not just Poland, he's coming after Poland because, to me, this kind of exposes his whole notion about NATO. Remember, with NATO, he kept saying, "Oh, I love NATO, but NATO needs to pay its fair share. We just need NATO to pay its fair share. It's all we need to do. We need NATO countries to step up and pay what they're supposed to pay. The United States is tired of carrying them. We're tired of the freeloading." Okay. We all knew that was bullshit. Poland took him seriously. Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, the 3 Baltic nations, and Poland at number 1, spend more of their GDP for defense than any other NATO country, including the United States. So little Poland and these little Baltic countries are spending, again, to stress, more of their per capita spending on the military than we are. And so you might want to punish other countries for not living up to their promise to spend 2% or whatever it is of their GDP on defense if they're members of NATO. But Trump, a couple weeks ago, abruptly canceled a planned deployment of roughly 4,000 troops to Poland. It was a rotation that was already in effect by the Army's 2nd Armored Brigade combat team. And it happened out of nowhere, seemingly. Congress was shocked. Mike Rogers, the Republican chair of the House Armed Services Committee, blasted the Pentagon's decision, said that Congress would inflict pain, and I quote, pain, on the Pentagon if it continued to draw down troops deployed to Europe. Take that with a massive grain of salt. I laughed when I read that. They're not going to do jack shit to harm Trump, but nevertheless, or Pete Hegseth, but nevertheless, that's what they're threatening to do. He also canceled a halted deployment. He also halted a planned deployment to Germany because Friedrich Merz, the chancellor, said that he was an idiot and didn't know what he was doing in Iran. So he got all bent out of shape to try to hurt the Germans. I spoke to somebody who's German a few days ago who was laughing and said, I don't know, do they think they're hurting us? Like, the only people who are really going to be hurt who are German are the people living around the bases who obviously make, money supplying food and restaurants and whatever to the troops. But we're not in Germany as a favor to Germany. We're in Germany as part of the Pax Americana that is a favor to us. And we decided to punish Germany. But okay, the Polish decision, though, I think to me is the tell. Because after Poland showed that it has the highest military burden of any NATO neighbor, I mean, they allocate 4.5% of its GDP to the military. That is way above the NATO's 2% benchmark, way 2% benchmark. And NATO and Poland has not gone out of its way to trash Trump at all.
No.
Ever.
He campaigned for them,
yeah.
Not him, but Tulsi Gabbard, campaigned for the president, who's a right winger.
Yeah. So why is he doing this? Because Vladimir Putin wants him to. That's why.
And I just want to add, which if I can open it up in my computer, unfreezes. There was a new decision made that is equally as dangerous, if I could get to that decision, but my computer froze. Here. It was yesterday, basically, that U.S. said that they're not going to, where is it? That they're not going to be involved if there is, I can't find the article, but basically if there is an attack on a NATO country, that they're, not really going to put their full resources into it. And they announced it yesterday or before yesterday. Let me see if I could find the article. But yeah. Okay, so here, Trump officials plan to inform NATO allies that the U.S. will significantly reduce military forces and capabilities it would make available to the alliance during a major war or crisis. The move is expected to be formally presented at a NATO defense meeting in Brussels. So basically, they're going to tell the other NATO allies that, as mind you, this is coming the same week that Belarus held nuclear exercises with Russia and is threatening its neighbors, Poland and the Baltics, Lithuania. Latvia is being threatened by Russia. They are literally threatening military action against Latvia. You have since last year, the amount of aggression. We even did an emergency live when drones went into Polish airspace and It was a huge, huge breach last September, and it just hasn't stopped. So you have Russia escalating its aggression, and here you have the U.S. Preparing to tell its NATO allies that sorry if there's a war, good luck. You're on your own. We have nothing to do with it. Have nothing to do with it. And also, this comes as Ukraine just reported yesterday that Russia is loading its missiles and drones with, I think drones too, the Geron drone, with depleted uranium that's exploding across Ukrainian cities. So you have Russia, escalating on every front. And this is what the U.S. is doing. So between the Polish pullout, the German pullout, and now, that they're preparing to tell them, like, sorry, if there's a war on your continent, good luck, thoughts and prayers. And that's it.
It's just, I mean, it's just unbelievable. And at the same time, Poland is dealing with according to European reporting, an unprecedented number of hybrid attacks on its territory over the last 2 years. They had a report they published this week, Poland's Internal Security Service, the EBW. Basically, the Russians have laid the groundwork for more complex operations, including using, interestingly, single-use agents. Now, we do the show called The Illegals, where we rewatch The Americans. And that is obviously not a single-use agent, those people who are sleeper cell agents all over the West. But now they're doing the complete opposite of that, right? They're just sending people in for one job. And then what?
Yep. Yeah, they started this actually with Ukraine. Wagner started a few years ago, where they were recruiting Americans. I was watching some of the channels that were literally like aimed at Americans to recruit them, to send them to the front, and then they expanded across Europe to basically put out instead of having running Russian agents across Europe. They put out ads on Telegram, basically hiring people. Here's $1,000. Go take a picture of this, or go set this railway on fire, or do this or that. So they're disposable agents where they just hire like local criminals on Telegram and basically pay them just for the job. They don't know who they're doing it for, what they're doing it. I think part of that was, you remember, after October 7th, we saw a rise across Europe of not only anti-Semitism, but protests. Some were organic protests to protest for Palestinians. Others were anti-Semitic protests, like where they were drawing the Star of David and like with blood on it across France and other things. While that, for instance, the Star of David thing was organized by Russia. So you had, a combination of organic, and same here. Here you had a combination of organic protest where people, came to stand up for the Palestinians and what was happening. And then at the same time, you also had, these false flag, like operations embedded within the organic protest to basically cause, escalate on the ground. So a lot of it, Russia was involved, Iran was involved, and in that case, for instance, for France, that was the Star of David. They didn't know. They just, the couple who did it said, "Oh, we got offered money to go and do this," and that's it. And they went and did it. They did say that it was, someone who was Russian speaking. That's it. So this is basically what they're doing, hiring disposable agents. That way, someone can go and take pictures of critical infrastructure, carry out local arson attacks, things like that. And that's more dangerous because here you're not tracking a cell. Here you're actually, you can't. It's like the lone wolves here in U.S. when they carry out a terrorist attack, you can't really track them. What is interesting and why I wish more people would pay attention to this axis of hell between Iran, China, Russia, and North Korea, Iran is starting the same thing. And I laughed. I mean, I should not laughed and like, oh, this is funny, but laughed to the point that they're literally, which Russia, I guarantee you set this up for them. That they news came out a few days ago that Iran is also looking and looking for disposable agents to carry out attacks across Europe, I assume the United States. And here again, they're sharing tactics. So, you have these countries, not that they love each other. I mean, as well as I do, that China and Russia have no love for each other. I mean, they frankly look over each other's, shoulders in the Far East and who's going to invade who first. But when it comes to going against Europe and the United States, they are now, which is extremely, extremely dangerous. And I don't understand why people aren't paying attention to this. But over the past few years since the full-scale invasion, not only are they using Ukraine as a laboratory to learn battlefield, techniques and see what works, what doesn't, drone warfare and everything between China and North Korea and Iran and everyone else who's been involved in helping Russia. But at the same time, they're sharing this information. So here you have Russia for years. We just came out at SIPA with a shadow report on Russia's shadow warfare and, not only what they've been doing, but, what European countries can do to slow these shadow attacks down. For years, Russia has been doing this, and now you see that they're clearly sharing their techniques with Iran, and now Iran is beginning to do the same. And This is why, it's so important when we keep, talking about this, how it's all interconnected. This is all interconnected. And if you pull out, just like, you've been saying, I've been saying, if you pull out, to the 30,000 foot view, this is the, outline of World War III. It started with Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. It accelerated. I'd argue it started a little bit earlier, but it accelerated with that. And you see this clear, alignment happening with now them sharing techniques, intelligence, and doing everything to assist each other against us. And the most dangerous part is, if at least we had even Nikki Haley as president, if we had a president who is not Trump, that actually cared about U.S. national security and keeping America safe, we wouldn't be in this position. We'd actually understand who the enemies are, who the aggressors are, and who the allies are. But with Trump, he specifically is doing everything to strategically muddle and destroy all our alliances and endanger America. Maybe he wants us to have be invaded so he could stay in power.
And the way it's going, unfortunately, is not just that if Trump leaves, we'll suddenly go back to the status quo. And Nikki Haley will never be elected president. Tucker Carlson has a better shot of being elected president in this Republican Party. And that's something to really be concerned about, because this Russian influence operation, you and I documented it ad nauseum about 2016. We also documented how far back it went. It has been incredibly successful. And Trump is the useful idiot this time around, but there are many others who are waiting in the wings, J.D. Vance being one of them, in some ways even worse potentially than Trump on these issues, Tucker Carlson being another. What you're seeing is a influence operation playing out that's aligning with where the MAGA base is right now. The question is, what came first, the chicken or the egg in this case? Who influenced whom? But the end result is the same. If we have another Republican president in the vein of J.D. Vance, or even a Marco Rubio, who used to be good on these issues until he wasn't, he knows better. That's the part that pisses me off, is that Marco Rubio knows better. He sees which way the wind is blowing. and it's not blowing in the direction of democracy whatsoever. And that's the part that really should terrify everybody here who is interested in these issues. And I appreciate that we have so many people between here and Substack and Mayday. I mean, we have hundreds, sometimes close to 1,000 people watching the show. And it is just upsetting to me that that this is where one of the major parties in the United States is going, and not just here. I mean, listen, France, Germany, if Farage gets in Britain, United Kingdom, they have these kinds of influence operations in every major capital in the West.
Yep.
Thank God for Mark Carney in Canada, but nevertheless, in every major Western capital. And that's something to bear in mind as they are colluding more and more with China, as China expands more and more into the Middle East and into Africa. We are seeing a realignment of the kind that we have not seen since the Pax Americana, ironically, the name of the show, began even prior to 1945, really, with the Lend-Lease Act back in the 1930s. So on that happy note, Olga, we've been at it for an hour. Anything to add besides, well, now this little puppy's asleep, so I don't want to.
Oh, the pumpkin.
I don't want to wake him up, but that's my good news.
No.
Yeah. Anybody else? Any thoughts?
My only thing is that we need to. The only thing I would add is we've watched this operation start with the Republicans in the 2000s, later 2000s. We don't know how much influence Russia had in the Tea Party movement. I frankly think that it had a very big part in, splintering Republicans and silencing people like what is his name? Who was the one in 2012 who warned about Russia and everyone laughed at him?
Romney.
Not McCain, Romney.
Romney.
Yeah. So, they did a good job of basically silencing all the Romneys and McCains and, that type. My worry is the same as now happening here. And we need to, on the Democratic side, we need to keep an eye because Russia obviously has never had allegiance. They started with the far left in the 50s, 60s, 70s. It's always been the far left. They moved towards the far right in the 2000s. I worry that, seeing that you have this, thank God, like falling poll numbers for the Republican Party and for Trump, obviously Russia has, up its sleeve. And not only Russia, this is Russia, China, Iran, and the Republican Party, by the way. But they might, do run similar operations on the left to basically splinter off all the common sense, normal voices and push basically kind of a Tea Party-ish type of a thing on the left. So I would keep an eye on the left. And if you see something, if anything looks like a Trojan horse, we just saw this woman, who wants to throw Jews in an internment camp. The Democrats stepped up and basically silenced her immediately. But it came out that it looks like the Republicans were basically funding this one in Texas, So we need to keep a thing for these type of operations and make sure that, if you're voting for someone, it can't just be because they're Democrat. Like, you need to look to make sure that they're not a Trojan horse being thrown in to throw our party off of, the rails.
Yes, and there are people in this chat who are bots calling it the Russia hoax. So thank you for coming to this chat, bots. I'm going to block you. Because I love that they're helping the algorithm. Like, this is what they do. They try to convince people that what is up is down and what is real is fake, and so on and so forth. Okay, on that note, she is a girl. For people who are asking what kind of what her gender is, she's a little mini dachshund girl. We need a name. So if you have ideas, ideas, let me know. My son wants Bean. My husband wants Maggie. I might want Penny. I actually wanted Monster, but Monster, she doesn't really look like a little monster.
Do Maggie Bean or Bean Maggie or something. Give her a first and a middle name.
I already have a Hagrid who's a Haggy, so I'd have a Haggy and a Maggie. That's why we want to go for Maggie.
Oh,
A Haggy and a Maggie.
oh,
I know.
Maggie and Maggie.
Maggie and Maggie. Okay.
Bean is cute, though. I agree. Someone just said Bean is so.
She does look like a little lima bean. I'm just looking at her. She's
Especially with those eyes, those droopy little eyes. Aw.
Le monster.
Just name not all of it. Maggie Bean Monster. what was the other one?
I never call my dog by the real name. Like Hagrid's Hagrid, but I don't call him Hagrid. I call him Haggy or Haggy or whatever. He's got so many different names. He's now in his. I'm turning around. He's given up. He's now gone to sleep in his little bed. Okay. All right, you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. I think we will be back here next Thursday, scheduling permitting. And thank you to everybody for joining us. And
I'll send out and you will send out the show notes for this since all the links are pulled. So anyone who wants to read more into any of the stories we discussed, you can.
And Rosie, I love that your dog's name is Tallulah. What a great name, little Tallulah. Maggie's too close to Maga. I don't know. Okay. All right. Later. Bye.
Bye.
Sherlock Bones. That's great. All right. Bye, guys. See ya.